Is there really a chance to be reincarnated after death? This action by the barefoot doctor actually saved the two pairs of mothers and sons in the two worlds of yin and yang. In 1997, Li Zongping worked as a village doctor in a village in northeastern China. At that time, villagers would see barefoot doctors like him for medical treatment. In the evening, he was gathering and drying medicinal herbs. A flustered young man rushed in from outside. It turned out to be Wu Chang from the neighboring village. He said that his wife was having some difficulties giving birth and hoped that Dr. Li could go and check on Li Zongping. He asked Wu Chang to go back first and said he would go get the medical kit and come over shortly. He didn't have time to tend to the medicinal herbs in the yard. He carried the medical kit on his back and walked towards the neighboring village. Li Zongping, although not formally trained, is experienced. He knows a bit of both Chinese and Western medicine, and even has some knowledge of unconventional practices. As he walked along the small river between the two villages, Li Zongping saw a woman sitting by the riverbank, crying with her head lowered. He found it strange that someone would be crying by the river at this time. Li Zongping, who has always been charitable, approached and inquired about what was wrong with the woman. The woman said that she had something very important to attend to on the other side of the river, but she was severely afraid of water and dared not cross. Turns out the recent rise in the river caused the water level to exceed the bridge surface by nearly 30 centimeters. The woman mentioned that she was frail and unable to cross on her own. Li Zongping didn't consider it a big deal and agreed to carry her across the river. He took off his shoes and socks, lifted the woman on his back, and felt that she was very light. Her body also felt cold. During the crossing, the woman was visibly trembling. Li Zongping comforted her, telling her not to be afraid. When they reached the other side, he set the woman down. But the woman's complexion looked even worse. She bowed respectfully to Li Zongping, and then turned around to leave. It seemed like she was heading towards the mountains upstream. Li Zongping was wondering in his heart when he lowered his head and saw a basket. This is the basket that the woman was carrying just now. She must have forgotten to take it with her. Li Zongping picked up the basket, wanting to call out to the woman. In the blink of an eye, the woman disappeared as soon as he looked up. He was in a hurry to go to Wu Chang's house to help with the childbirth, and couldn't care about much else. He just carried the basket first, planning to find an opportunity to return it to her later. Li Zongping hurried to Wu Chang's house. Wu Chang's father quickly led him inside. Li Zongping casually placed the basket on the millstone in the courtyard. Inside, the midwife was busy and sweating profusely. The woman in labor has been exhausted from all the commotion and has a pale face, almost in a state of collapse. Li Zongping, seeing the situation, first gave the woman in labor some glucose, and then used several silver needles to help alleviate her pain. Just then, there was a bark from a dog outside the house. Li Zongping glanced outside and saw that the dog was barking non-stop at the basket on the grindstone. He felt that the dog's barking was unusual, and a thought crossed his mind. He hurriedly rushed out. The dog stared fiercely at the basket as if it saw something dangerous. Li Zongping already had some idea in his mind. He reached out to the basket and carefully lifted the floral cloth on top. Sure enough, as he had suspected, it was a dead infant. Li Zongping already had a good idea in his mind and picked up the basket. At the moment when the basket left the millstone, a loud cry of a child came from the house, followed by the midwife's voice announcing the birth of a son. Li Zongping completely understood that the woman by the river was not human at all. She was the mother of the dead infant in the basket. Both mother and child died during childbirth. There is a folk belief that ghosts cannot cross bridges. The woman was trying to send the child across the river for reincarnation. I didn't expect Li Zongping to put the child on a millstone. Millstones are believed to be able to suppress ghosts, so the child couldn't come out. The matter has been resolved, and Li Zongping sent the deceased infant to the home of village shaman Luo. It is said that this village shaman Luo can help with the souls of those children who died prematurely. If a stranger asks to borrow something from you, You must never refuse directly, because they might not be human. He is here to punish the unkind people. The story takes place on a winter night. At that time, Li Zongping and Sheng Mei had just fallen in love. They had just finished watching a movie together. They were chatting with each other while walking towards the bus station. Sheng Mei said she didn't want to take the bus today and asked Li Zongping to walk her back. This way the two of them can chat a little longer. Li Zongping promptly agreed. Passing by a hotel called Sheng Mei, he intentionally slowed down and said that he was a bit tired. Unexpectedly, the straightforward Li Zongping asked her to stand still and rest for a few minutes. Then he continued to take Sheng Mei back home. Sheng Mei was a little unhappy and said goodbye to Li Zongping. Li Zongping watched Sheng Mei go upstairs before turning around and leaving. It's colder today. In order to get home sooner, he took a shortcut. Because it was his first love, he kept recalling his performance today on the way. He suddenly heard footsteps behind him and instinctively turned to look back. But there was nothing empty in the alley. He stopped and listened carefully, and the footsteps indeed disappeared. Thinking he misheard, he didn't pay much attention and continued walking. However, after just a few steps, he heard the footsteps again. This time, he became more alert and looked back sideways with his eyes. An old man suddenly appeared behind him, startling him. He couldn't help but exclaim, "I'll!" Then he grumpily said to the old man, "Uncle, you'll give people a fright acting like this." The old man quickly apologized to him. Li Zongping thought the old man was heading in the same direction, so they exchanged pleasantries as they walked. However, the old man did not walk alongside him, but followed behind. This made Li Zongping somewhat uncomfortable. After walking for about 10 minutes, Li Zongping suddenly felt that something was wrong. He could usually walk through this alley in 2 or 3 minutes, but today he had been walking for almost 20 minutes and still hadn't reached the end. He couldn't help but cast a glance at the old man. There does seem to be something suspicious when he took a closer look. In the midst of winter, the old man is only wearing a shirt, and yet he doesn't seem to feel cold at all. Li Zongping tentatively asked the old man if he was cold. The old man, with a gloomy face, said he was very cold and asked if he could borrow a coat to wear. Li Zongping felt the strangeness of the old man, and did not dare to answer casually whether to lend the coat or not. He hesitated for a moment, agreed to lend the coat to him first, wanting to see what would happen. Li Zongping took off the coat and instantly shivered from the cold. He raised his collar and handed the coat to the old man. Strangely, the old man disappeared directly. Looking at the empty alley, Li Zongping wondered if the old man was not human. Vanishing without a trace, he was unable to walk out of the alley for a while. He couldn't care about that much, hastily put on the coat, quickened his pace to leave. Just as he had walked out of the alley, the suddenly ringing phone startled him. It turned out to be his girlfriend, Sheng Mei, calling. She said she called for over 20 minutes, but he didn't answer. Li Zongping explained what had just happened, and Sheng Mei said that she called because of that. She said that the alley has been unsettled recently. An elderly person who lived nearby a few months ago. He had a heart attack while walking in the alley. He fell to the ground in pain. Many people passed by, but no one stopped to help him. The old man died helplessly like that. Later, I heard from the old man's son that his medicine was in his shirt pocket. If someone had helped him at the time, he wouldn't have left in pain. Since then, people often encounter ghosts hitting walls in the alley. Most of the people who encounter the ghost of that old man will fall ill and not recover when they go home. Li Zongping, however, has been perfectly fine since returning home. He often wonders why. What has happened to the inherently good people? What would have happened if I hadn't lent my clothes to the old man back then? The old man in the coffin suddenly sat up. He said, "The Netherworld envoy has caught the wrong person." The old lady actually experienced it herself. Go to the underworld. The story takes place in 2004 in a village located in Xinyang City, Hunan Province, China. Li Zongping and Sheng Mei just got married and are living together with an old mother. The couple is very filial and doesn't let the old lady do any household chores. In the morning, Li Zongping went to call his mother to eat. He knocked on the door for a while, but there was no response. Feeling somewhat worried, he pushed open the door and entered the house. He saw that his mother had not yet gotten up, and a sense of ominous foreboding arose in his heart. The old lady remained motionless, devoid of any signs of life. Li Zongping trembled as he tentatively reached out his hand to investigate. His mother had already stopped breathing. Her body was cold through and through. She passed away so peacefully. The couple could only bear their grief in silence. They held a funeral for the old lady. Li Zongping is the only son and has to stay up alone at night. Tears have been streaming down his face non-stop. He still cannot come to terms with the sudden loss of his mother. His wife Shengmei feels sorry for him and asks him to take a break. She says she will take over and stay up with him in the latter part of the night. Li Zongping said his mother had been watching over him for 30 years, and he wanted to accompany her well in her last days. However, a strange thing happened at that moment. There was a howling sound coming from the old lady's coffin, sounding like it was coming from her throat. This frightened the two of them. Suddenly, the old lady sat up, and the couple didn't know if she was pretending to be a corpse. They stuttered and called out for their mother. But unexpectedly, the old lady started speaking and said she was fine, just a bit hungry and cold. The couple realized that their mother had come back to life and quickly helped her up. They assisted the old lady to the bed and prepared a hot meal for her. The old lady's complexion gradually improved, and she began to tell the couple about her strange experience. She said it seemed like the Netherworld envoy had mistakenly captured the wrong person. She was originally sleeping when she suddenly saw two dark figures standing by her bed. They muttered a few words to the old lady, and she uncontrollably sat up and silently followed the two figures. The old lady realized she had already passed away, and the Netherworld envoy had come to take her. Despite her deep reluctance, she was powerless to resist. After a while, she walked into a long line of people and arrived at a strange city gate. The city tower was tall, the walls were high, and the windows were small, clearly not inhabited by the living. There was a man wearing a tall hat sitting at the entrance, checking the identities of the people one by one. When it was the old lady's turn, she couldn't understand what he was saying. The man with the tall hat called the two dark figures aside, and they seemed to be arguing quietly. Then the dark figures took her and walked in the opposite direction. After a while, the dark figures led the old lady into a small dark room, muttered a few words, and then left. Shortly after, the small dark room started to fog up, and the old lady couldn't see anything. Waited until the fog slowly dispersed. Below her appeared a bright light. Within the light, her son and daughter-in-law were guarding a coffin. Inside the coffin was herself. Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet gave way, and she fell downwards. After a moment of losing consciousness, she regained consciousness. The young couple couldn't believe it after hearing it. But the old lady came back to life, and they saw it with their own eyes. They had no choice but to believe. The next day, Li Zongping's mother was mistakenly captured by the Netherworld envoy and took a trip to the underworld, then came back to life. This incident quickly spread throughout the entire village. The following this little story is no less than The Legend of Ming Jiang Weeping at the Great Wall. I cried for the first time because of a female ghost. It is said that one relies on the mountains for food and on the water for drink. In the 1980s, residents of Duobaishan town, which means Many Treasures Mountain, all relied on a mine for their livelihood. At that time, Li Zongping was a young and inexperienced guy. He was arranged by adults to work as a miner in the mountains. The young man is quite good at handling things. The old miners at the mine all took good care of him. It was his first time going to work with two old miners. They arrived at a fork in the road, and the two old miners led him to go directly to the left. Li Zongping took a glance at the mine map on the wall and reminded the older brother that it would be closer to go from the right. But the two men casually said, There's nothing wrong with the right tunnel, you don't need to go in there. They didn't give Li Zongping a chance to ask further questions, so he just worked quietly like that every day. One day, Li Zongping overslept and had to go to the mine alone. Feeling a little anxious when he reached the fork in the road, he thought that taking the right tunnel would save time, so he hurriedly went in and started running. After running for about 5 or 6 minutes, he suddenly noticed a figure in the tunnel. As he approached for a closer look, he found it was a woman. She was wearing a diagonally buttoned top, with a pale face and vacant eyes, and her body was even semi-transparent. This sight frightened Li Zongping so much that his legs went weak, and he could hardly move. However, the figure did not react at all. It took Li Zongping a long time to recover his senses. He then hurriedly ran out of the mouth of the tunnel. Back in the dormitory, he told everyone about the scene he saw just now. But it seems that he was the only one who was scared. Everyone else was surprisingly calm. He thought that people didn't believe him. Later, a fellow miner briefly told him that when this woman was alive, everyone knew her. After she passed away, her spirit stayed in that mine shaft and doesn't harm anyone. 2 months passed, and Li Zongping continued to go to work with his fellow miners as usual. But as soon as he reached the entrance of the mine, he saw many people running out. They were shouting while running, "Hurry out! Madame Bai has gone crazy!" They were all bewildered for a moment. At that moment, Li Zongping thought, "Wasn't it said that Madame Bai never harmed anyone?" Just as they curiously watched the people running outside, Madame Bai appeared beside them. She looked extremely terrifying, completely different from how she was before. She was covered in blood, with a fierce and sinister expression, staring malevolently at them. Before they could react, the mad Madame Bai rushed towards them. They started running frantically, but Madame Bai chased closely behind. At the instant they dashed out of the cave entrance, there was a loud bang as the mine collapsed. People were all shocked by this sudden situation. At this moment, the elderly master was said, "Madame Bai was trying to save us just now." Li Zongping couldn't hold back anymore, and he asked Master Wu, "Who is Madame Bai exactly?" It turns out that Madame Bai is the wife of Bai Gui. Because their families didn't approve, the two of them eloped here to make a living. The couple is very loving. Bai Gui goes to work at the mine every day. Madame Bai does the laundry and cooks at home. At that time, the workers' brothers at the mine often followed Bai Gui to have free meals. Then one day, bad news arrived. The mine collapsed, burying over 20 workers, including Bai Gui. Madame Bai was frantically trying to go in and rescue the trapped people. People were all trying to stop her from going in. But in the blink of an eye, Madame Bai broke free. She didn't hesitate to rush in despite the stones still falling in the hole. Then, a more violent collapse occurred, and Madame Bai never came out again. Master Wu tearfully recounted the incident. He said that since then, people have often seen Madame Bai's shadow in the mine. She has not given up on finding her husband. At this point, everyone also realized that today Madame Bai was behaving unusually. She seemed to have sensed the imminent landslide and scared everyone with her terrifying appearance. People were truly grateful from the bottom of their hearts to Madame Bai for building the graves for Bai Gui and Madame Bai at the foot of the mountain. This story is widely circulated. Later, this place was also renamed Madame Bai's tomb. Is having only one child good? Is it better to have multiple children? Parents probably have all considered this question. It is said that there are no unfilial sons beside a sickbed. In order to no longer take care of his paralyzed father, the 3 brothers in this story actually resorted to such despicable means. The story took place in the 1990s in Chao County, Hezi, Shandong Province, China. Old Wu in the village has passed away. All 3 sons are capable of earning money. The funeral was held very decently, but none of the 3 shed a tear. In the evening, the 3 brothers discussed how to spend the night, and unanimously agreed that since no one was around, they could skip the wake altogether. The 3 of them were afraid of being seen, and gossiped about if they went back home, so they fell asleep soundly on the big Kong in the room of the funeral parlor. The vast funeral parlor was empty, appearing very desolate. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps coming from the direction of the funeral parlor startled the second elder. He sat up and listened carefully. It sounded like someone was knocking on the coffin in the funeral parlor. He quickly woke up the eldest and the third eldest. The three brothers all heard the sound outside, and it was getting louder. They quickly got up, opened the door, and saw their father's coffin shaking violently, making a banging sound from inside. Just as the three were at a loss for what to do, with a loud cracking sound, one side of the coffin was torn open. Three of them quickly rushed up to press down on the coffin. As it seemed they could no longer hold it down, the third one shouted, "Elder brother, hurry and bring a rope." The eldest didn't dare to delay at all, fetched a long hemp rope. The three brothers hurriedly and messily tied up the coffin securely. However, the large coffin kept shaking non-stop. They were worried that the rope might break. The third brother suddenly thought of someone. He quickly asked the eldest to go and call Li Zongping, who made the coffin. Without saying a word, the eldest rushed out. The second and third brothers stayed behind, guarding the large coffin that kept swaying. They felt a chill running down their spines. They endured a difficult 20 minutes. The eldest finally brought someone over. Li Zongping is famous for being capable. Besides being skilled at making quality coffins, he also knows a little about astronomy, geography, and some unusual knowledge. When the other two saw him coming, they actually stepped forward to complain. Li Zongping said that the quality of the coffin he made was not up to standard. Li Zongping ignored them and went straight to the coffin. The three brothers were overwhelmed by Li Zongping's presence, and no one dared to speak. Li Zongping walked around the coffin, reached out to touch the lid, sighed deeply, and then turned to look at the three brothers. Disappointed, he said, "There's nothing wrong with this coffin. The problem might lie with you three." The three brothers looked at each other in silence. Li Zongping tapped on the lid solemnly. "If you don't speak the truth, I won't be responsible." Three people were sweating profusely, unable to look directly at Li Zongping. The third person stuttered and said, "There's nothing we can do." Li Zongping already sensed that something had happened and angrily pointed at them, shouting, "You've done something outrageous. Even if you were my own father, I wouldn't let you off the hook." The three of them were scared stiff, and the third person stammered as he recounted what had happened. Last winter, the patriarch of the Wu family suddenly had a stroke and became paralyzed, unable to take care of himself. The three sons discussed taking turns to take care of the elderly person, but all three are busy with work. The task of taking care of the elderly mostly falls on their daughters-in-law. Women are somewhat inconvenienced. After a few days, they become impatient. In the countryside, hiring a maid also raises concerns about gossip from others. The three brothers discussed and decided to send their father on his way early. The next day, they brought an old lady with them. The old lady said that this act was damaging the posthumous merit and asked the brothers not to be stingy with money. The three brothers didn't care about the money and readily agreed without hesitation. The old lady took a glance and old Mr. Wu said he still has over 3 years of lifespan. She took out a specially made candle, a piece of red string, and a paper talisman from her bag. She wrote down old Wu's astrological birth chart on the paper, rolled it up on the candle, and then tied it with the red string. The other end of the string is tied to old Wu's middle finger. She lit a candle, and a strange smell instantly filled the room. The candle burned shorter, and old Wu's complexion worsened. The three brothers looked at their father's painful expression with mixed emotions, only daring to glance at the slowly diminishing candle. When the candle burned all the way down, the old lady said, "He's gone." The three men finally breathed a sigh of relief, but old Wu's mouth and eyes just wouldn't close. After Li Zongping listened, he was so angry he gritted his teeth and cursed them for losing all decency. It was strange that when they finished telling the story, old Wu's coffin also quieted down. Li Zongping said that the old man still cared about you guys, and didn't want to do anything to harm you. He just wanted a clear understanding. Old Wu did not die a natural death. According to Li Zongping, he cannot be buried peacefully. He must be made to stand as if alive for 3 years, and during these 3 years, 3 meals must be offered to him daily. Gurin occasionally doubts Li Zongping's methods, but as soon as a meal is delayed, he will have a splitting headache. The truth of the story is not important. What's important is that as children, we should understand to repay kindness. It is only right and proper to take care of and accompany our parents in their old age until the end. We must not perfunctorily deal with things, and we absolutely must not lose all sense of decency. Because everyone will grow old. Don't randomly buy strange toys for children. Even more so, do not attempt to use toys to replace your own company. Otherwise, you don't know what terrible things might happen. This story takes place in Tongdu District, Tianjin City. It is the personal experience of my colleague. Li Zongping works abroad year-round, and can only return home once every 6 months. His wife Shengmei and son Little Shuai also miss him very much. Little Shuai ran up to his dad and asked if he brought any gifts. Li Zongping took out an exquisite clown doll and teased his son as he handed it to him. This was carefully selected by him for his son abroad. Little Shuai usually loves all kinds of dolls. He is fond of this exquisitely crafted, funny-looking clown. He treasures it as if it were a precious gem and cannot bear to put it down. Li Zongping also doesn't forget to tell Shengmei how good the dolls made abroad are. He stayed at home for more than a week, and then Li Zongping hurriedly left the country for work again. After another half a year, he came back home on vacation, but his son did not come out to greet him. Shengmei said that Little Shuai has been acting very strangely recently. He stays in his room all day, talking to himself while holding onto that clown doll. Shengmei took him to the hospital for a checkup, but no issues were found. The doctor said that having no father figure around for a long time can have a certain impact on a child's character development. Li Zongping feels very guilty and wants to take his son out to relax. But Little Shuai completely ignores him. Li Zongping reached out and gave Little Shuai a pat on the shoulder. To my surprise, Little Shuai suddenly turned around and let out a fierce scream, shouting not to touch him. At this moment, Little Shuai is already severely emaciated, with sunken eye sockets, and his facial features are distorted due to anger. Li Zongping's heart is being twisted like a knife. He is trying to communicate with his son again. He gently took the clown from Little Shuai's hand. But Little Shuai suddenly shivered all over. He kept roaring at the top of his voice. Shengmei quickly said not to use his clown. She tried many times with no success. Li Zongping felt that this might be a psychological illness and could only leave the room with his wife. He apologized to Shengmei while comforting her, saying that he would ask someone to find an expert to check on her tomorrow. But what he didn't expect was that a more bizarre thing happened that same night when Shengmei got up to go to the bathroom. She walked into the living room and heard strange noises coming from the kitchen. When she entered the kitchen, she saw her son, Little Shuai, squatting in front of the fridge eating. She asked him if he was hungry, but what she didn't expect was Little Shuai turning around. She saw her son gnawing on a piece of raw meat with blood on it. She was so scared that she collapsed and sat on the ground. Little Shuai at this moment looked like a terrifying clown, grinning and rushing towards his mother. Fortunately, Li Zongping heard the noise and ran out, hugging Little Shuai tightly. Little Shuai struggled desperately, shouting, "Look, I want to eat meat! I want to eat meat!" Early next morning, the couple took Little Shuai to the hospital. The expert first injected the child with a sedative. Then the doctor pulled Li Zongping aside to analyze the child's condition. He said that the preliminary judgment is that the child lacks fatherly love and places too much emotional reliance on toys, leading to psychological autism. Li Zongping is very self-blaming, saying that he thought giving the child more toys could make him happy. He casually mentioned that clown doll, but the expert deemed it very important. Li Zongping hurried home and brought the doll over. The expert sternly asked him if the doll was bought near Mexico. Li Zongping asked him in surprise how he knew. The expert said that he had been there for medical exchange before. This clown is a very evil thing. Indigenous people in Mexico make these dolls. They use almost entirely real human skin and hair. The locals use them to sacrifice and nurture souls, especially the souls of children who died prematurely. Clowns are usually placed in cemeteries. If people come into contact with them for a long time, they will absorb people's vitality and turn into evil spirits. Local dark wizards will use these evil spirits to perform a ritual to summon demons. When Li Zongping heard this, he immediately became nervous. He pleaded with the experts to help save his son. The expert said that these were unfounded legends and advised Li Zongping to spend more time with his child. The closer these things are to the child, the better. Li Zongping, holding the clown doll he bought, felt angry and guilty. In the middle of the night, he found an empty space and lit a torch. It emitted a strong foul smell. After about 10 minutes, the clown doll turned into a pile of ashes. It's quite strange that little Shuai felt much better the next day, and Li Zongping resigned to stay at home to accompany his wife and children. Little Shuai quickly turned back into a lively and cheerful boy. More and more widow-style marriages in today's society. The mental health of left-behind children is also easily neglected. This YouTuber hopes to inspire people who strive outside. Do not forget what you are striving for. Spending more time with family to give children a truly complete home. This is a heart-wrenching story. The domestic violence man buried his son, who was in a feigned death state. The child, after waking up, struggled desperately for 3 days. The outcome is truly heartbreaking. The story takes place in Danfeng County, Shanxi Province in 1995. Old Li is idle all day long. The villagers all look down on him. His behavior has made life difficult for his wife Damiai and sons Li Zong and Li Ping. Old Li got upset outside and kicked open the door when he came home. He shouted that he was hungry. He asked his 2 sons, who were eating, to move aside. He picked up a bowl and started eating himself. Just as he took a bite, he spit it out with a "pu" and roared angrily, "Why is it cold?" He got so angry that he flipped over the table. Damiai said with a look of grievance, "The chimney is blocked. No one is fixing it. I can't light a fire." Old Li, hearing this as if it was blaming himself for not working, went up and slapped Damiai in the face. Damiai knew Old Li's temper and was afraid of affecting the 2 children, so she had to bear with it. Brother Li Zong quickly told their mother, "Mom, let me and my brother fix the stove. Don't ask him to do it." Old Li vented his anger, took off his clothes, and went back to his room to sleep. Damiai looks helpless and can only take 2.5 children to check the chimney. The mother and her 3 children kept fiddling until evening, finally making the smoke come out. But the next day, a big incident happened. The 2 children, who never overslept, could not be awakened even by knocking on the door. Damiai had to push the door open with all her strength. But as soon as she entered the room, she was stunned. The room was filled with thick smoke. 2 children lay on the heated brick bed, their faces turning blue. Apparently, when the chimney was cleaned yesterday, something went wrong, and smoke leaked into the room. Damiai cried out in distress, calling for Old Li to come quickly. Old Li entered the children's room, looking displeased. He walked into the room and was stunned by the scene before him. Although he had wanted to scold a few words, he couldn't. Damiai turned around and blamed Old Li, saying it was all his fault for not fixing the chimney. Old Li dared not get angry this time. The 2 of them carried the child to the courtyard, trying to pinch and press. Damiai's panic cry attracted many neighbors. Everyone stepped forward to help, and finally managed to revive the eldest, Li Zong. But the second eldest, Li Ping, did not get saved. There is no tradition in the area to build a tomb for children. Old Li dug a hole behind his house and buried Li Ping's coffin there. Damiai cried for 2 days and 2 nights. Old Li, feeling annoyed, beat her twice. Finally, he had a peaceful sleep on the third night. But in the middle of the night, Danyai was awakened by a strange noise. She told Old Li that it sounded like someone scratching the door, and asked him to get up and take a look. But Old Li had just fallen asleep and was awakened again. He angrily scolded Danyai and, concerned that something might have happened to their eldest son, reluctantly got up to check by himself. He opened the door, but saw nothing. The sound seemed to be coming from outside the courtyard, sometimes near, sometimes far, causing anxiety in those who listened. After confirming that their eldest son was fine, Danyai went back to the room, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was not right. For 3 consecutive days, she kept hearing this sound. She felt that it was her youngest son scratching the coffin lid. On the 4th day, Danyai couldn't stand it anymore, but Old Li remained unresponsive. So she decided to dig open the coffin herself to take a look. No matter how Old Li tried to stop her, it was useless. He resorted to his old tricks again. He thought that a good beating would make her behave. But this time, Danyai is determined to clarify things. She took an iron shovel and went to the back of the house, digged like crazy, wait until she dug out and opened the shallow coffin. Danyai's heart felt like it was shattered, and she froze on the spot. Li Ping's expression was fierce, his whole body stiff, and his hands still in a scratching position. The fingers were so worn out that even the skin and flesh were worn through, causing distortion due to excessive force. And inside the coffin lid, there were row after row of bloody scratch marks. Danyai's heart was torn apart. She knew her son was still alive, but despite hearing his voice, she didn't go to save him. Her heartbreaking cry echoed throughout the entire village. Since then, Danyai went insane. She carried a piece of wood in her arms, and told everyone that this was her son, and he was still alive. And Old Li, not long after, was beaten to death by a few thugs due to gambling debts. The eldest son, Li Zong, went to another city and changed his name to Li Zongping. On the 7th day after death, she returned for revenge. Only because her mother-in-law treated her like a servant during her lifetime, which pushed her to a dead end. The story takes place in Tunbeo Town, Liaoning Province in 1988. Every morning, Li Zongping would stand outside his neighbor's courtyard wall early. It turns out he was waiting for the young widow Shengmei. These two are indeed unlucky. They were originally a childhood sweethearts. But Shengmei's father despised Li Zongping for being an orphan and forced his daughter to marry the short-lived Wu Chong. After Wu Chong's death, Li Zongping rekindled hope. Every morning, he would wait for Shengmei to work in the fields together. On that day, as usual, Li Zongping waited to see Shengmei, but Shengmei came out with a sad face, keeping her head down, and walked away without looking at him. When Li Zongping turned around, he saw Shengmei's annoying mother-in-law standing at the door staring at them. This old lady was very malicious, always treating Shengmei like a slave, especially became even more cruel after her son's death. In the evening, Li Zongping was drinking alone at home, feeling depressed. He heard the miserable cries from next door, and knew that Shengmei had been beaten again by that old lady. But after all, Shengmei is still the wife of the Wu family, and Li Zongping is also powerless. The villagers all know that he is a pitiful and capable person. Some people have also tried to persuade Shengmei's mother-in-law to reconcile with the two children, but they were all scolded out by the old lady. This morning, something happened at Shengmei's home. When her mother-in-law got up and saw that breakfast was not ready, she immediately rushed to Shengmei's room while angrily muttering. She pounded on the door with all her might, but there was no response for a long time. In a fit of anger, the old lady kicked the door open. But when she entered, she was stunned. Shengmei had already taken her own life with drugs. Her body was cold and stiff. Fate was truly unfair to her. She had finally accepted her fate and was living with Wu Chong, but Wu Chong had already passed away. Now, she not only cannot be with Li Zongping, but also has to work like a slave every day. She couldn't bear it for a moment, and attempted to take her own life. After Xingmei's death, the mother-in-law became happy. She quickly told her son and Xingmei that there was someone underground taking care of her son. But the story did not end there. On the 7th day after Xingmei's death, a woman who went to visit the Wu family ran out of the house in terror. She said something major had happened at the old lady's house. After hearing this, all the villagers rushed to the Wu family's house. When the crowd pushed the door open, they smelled a strong scent of blood. Xingmei's younger uncle was lying on the steps. It looks like he was trying to crawl out, but it's clear that he has already died. A few brave villagers cautiously went around and pushed the door to enter the house. I saw Xingmei's younger siblings dead in the kitchen. She was disemboweled, and it was a gruesome sight. When people entered the old lady's room, but people only saw a large pool of blood on the bed. Suddenly, a sound came from the wardrobe in the room, scared the villagers to tremble. The courageous village head stepped forward and carefully opened the wardrobe door. It turned out to be Xingmei's cousin's son curled up in the wardrobe, trembling. Everyone quickly took the child to the village chief's house and kept comforting him. After the child calmed down a bit, a woman who was usually quite familiar with him started asking what he had seen. The child cried and said he saw Xingmei killing them one by one. Everyone present was stunned, because they all witnessed Xingmei's death. According to the child's description, at that time, he and his dad were playing with toys in the room when suddenly they heard Mom's screams coming from the kitchen. They ran to the kitchen and saw Mom covered in blood collapsing. The deceased Xingmei's feet were off the ground, hanging in the air. The nails were swinging wildly like steel knives. The child's father ran over and was immediately scared silly, without waiting for him to react. He was slapped by Xingmei and turned into a bloody mess. Xingmei did not harm the child and floated directly into the old lady's room. The villagers didn't know what to say because everyone was very clear about how this family usually treated Xingmei. The village chief brought some people to Xingmei's grave site. They found that the grave had already been dug open. Everyone looked closer and was almost scared out of their wits. The person lying in the coffin was not Xingmei, but an unrecognizable old lady. Everyone quickly called the police. But the case has not been solved. But some people speculate that this was done by Li Zongping. Perhaps he learned about Xingmei's tragic death. He returned with her corpse to seek revenge. Because the wounds on the old lady's family looked like they were inflicted by Li Zongping normally, caused by the steel claws he used to make hemp bags. The old lady may have died unjustly. And it seems that the younger uncle has repeatedly insulted Xingmei. The younger siblings naturally hate her and won't give her any good treatment. So they have all brought disaster upon themselves. But all of this is just speculation by the villagers because after that incident, Li Zongping disappeared and no one knows exactly what happened. But later on, some people said they saw Li Zongping and Xingmei in another city. However, these are just rumors. People renting houses and buying second-hand furniture should be cautious. You must make sure to clarify the source of the furniture. Otherwise, you wouldn't know what terrible things might happen. The story takes place in Baiyun District, Guangdong Province. A second-hand furniture market in Zenugio village. Li Zongping and his wife Xingmei went to the market to look around on the weekend. They want to furnish their newly rented house with some furniture. The bald boss warmly welcomed them, chatting with them while leading the two into the shop. Xingmei likes dressing up and wants to buy a bigger wardrobe.